Okay, this is Algebra 1, Lesson 50, Quadratic Equations. So the objective today we're going to identify solutions, axis of symmetry, minimum, maximum, domain, and range. Okay, so I've taught you how to graph lines, okay? And I taught you the different parts of the line, like y-intercept, x-intercept, right? Remember that? And where the lines cross, it's called the solution. That was when we talked about lines. Then we talked about, this week we talked about how to make quadratic equations, right? And you learned that the last couple of days, okay? And I taught you the shortcut yesterday. So today we're going to learn about the parts of the graph. So let's pretend that we had our graph. Say we had our x and our y axis, okay? I'm just going really quick here. Let's say you drew your parabola. Let's say it was at your vertex was here at -1, -2. Okay. Okay. That's your vertex. We've learned how to graph it. Okay. So let's just pretend you graphed it. There's parts of the graph that we're gonna identify now. This kind of graph is it's called a parabola specifically, but this is a quadratic equation graph, okay? The first thing I teach you is how to find solutions, okay? Solutions, okay? Solutions, if you want to find solutions, the easiest way to do it is you look on the x-axis, and wherever the graph crosses the x-axis, that's a solution. So if you look at the graph, it crosses here, and it crosses here. So if I look at these two places, this is a solution, x is equal to, and I just count from 0, -1, 2. X is equal to -2. That's one solution. Okay? Another solution is right here, and I count over, and this is at 1, so x is equal to 1 is a second solution. Okay? So there are two solutions on this graph. The way you find solutions, again, is wherever this graph touches the x-axis, that's a solution. Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to teach you today is about the axis of symmetry. Okay? Everyone know what symmetry is, right? Your faces are symmetrical. If you were to draw a line straight down the middle of your face, right? You have an eyeball on the right side. Where else do you have an eyeball? On the opposite side, right? You have a nostril right here. Where else do you have a nostril? Good. Some of you got that. You have an ear here. Where else do you have an ear? Good. Your face is symmetrical. It should be symmetrical. You have an eyebrow here. At least most of you do. Some of you girls might not have eyebrows. Well, I've seen that before. I don't know. Most people have eyebrows. Some people shave them off. Okay, nonetheless. Okay, so you have an eyebrow on the right side, you have an eyebrow on the left side. It's symmetrical, right? Does that make sense? So, can you all imagine if I were to draw a line down the center here that this side would be symmetrical with this side? Do you all see that? Okay. The line that's drawn in the middle is called an axis of symmetry. It's this word right here, axis of symmetry. So, scribbling here. Okay, so this line right here is called the axis of symmetry, and the way we figure out the axis of symmetry, well, we could write it as AOS, axis of symmetry, and all you do is you write x is equal to, and then you take this first number here in the vertex, which is -1, plug it in here. Okay, that's your axis of symmetry. All right, so that's the second thing we're learning today, and then the third thing is the minimum or maximum. So we ask ourselves first, does the graph ever stop going up? Does it ever stop going up? No, these lines go up forever. So there really is no maximum. Then we ask ourselves, does the graph ever stop going down? Yeah, it stops going down here. It seems to stop right here and starts going back up. This would be a minimum, right? Because there's a minimum point. It doesn't really go any lower than this. So this would be called a minimum. And this minimum is like a line, right? The graph only goes across this line or above this line. It doesn't go below this line. So this line we have to identify. This is called our minimum. And the way we say it is we just say y is, and then we take this, since it's a minimum, take the second, the number is -2. Say the graph is greater than or equal to -2. So this is a minimum. All right, and domain and range we've learned before about 3 weeks ago. Remember, domain is how far to the left and right a graph goes, and range is how far up and down it goes. Okay, we're good. I'm going to show you a couple more times how this works. Really easy, okay? What I'd like you to do is copy this down in your notes, and then I'll give you a chance to see them in action one more time, okay? Oh. So, we're going to learn how to do this. If you want to look at the steps, they're right here. They should be written down in your notes ready. Okay. So you can pause the video here if you need to. Continuing. Okay, so number 1. This is how you would do your homework. So, we know how to graph. I'm not going to teach you how to graph today. I'm actually going to graph it for you quickly. So just watch right now. I'll do number 1. So in your homework, it's going to say graph and then identify all this stuff. Okay, so the first thing you do, you're going to graph. So of course, you're going to find your -b over 2a, and you're like, okay, once you do that, I'm going to do it for you because I could do it quickly, and I don't want to spend the time there. Figure out your vertex is 0, 0, right? You do your -b over 2a and plug it back in, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to do the shortcut, so there should be a point here, there should be a point here, and there should be a point here, and a point here, and you're working, and you're like, okay, this is almost done, graphing my graph. Okay, and you're all done, right? You just graphed it. So you're done with the first part, you're graphing it. So now what we're learning today is identifying the parts. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out the solutions. Solutions, remember, are anywhere where the line touches the x-axis. So I look here and I'm like, okay, here's the x-axis, here's the graph. Does this line touch the graph? Yeah, it touches right here at the vertex, okay? It touches only once though, right? It touches one time there. So that solution I count, oh, it's right at the x-axis at 0. So then our solution would be x is equal to 0. That's your only solution, okay, for this example. All right. Next thing we're going to do is figure out our axis of symmetry. Our AOS, axis of symmetry. That's just the abbreviation for it. Okay. All we do, axis of symmetry, write down AOS, and then you write x is equal to, and then you look at the first number of your vertex, the x coordinate, what is it? 0. Okay, so you write 0 here, and then you're done with axis of symmetry. Then you talk about minimum or maximum. Ask yourself, how high does it go? Well, does it ever stop going any higher? No, it keeps going up forever. So there is no maximum. There's no cap on it. So then we think, is there a minimum? Does this ever stop going down? Yeah, it stops going down right here. What is this line called? Okay, this line is called, we start writing, it's a minimum. And we know that y is going to be greater than or equal to, and we take the second number here, 0. Okay? So we got the minimum now written down. Last thing is your domain. Your domain is always going to be the same on these types of problems. You start from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. Put x in the middle, and then put less than or equal to sign 0. And what this is saying is that this graph, will always spread wider and wider and wider. It's never going to stop spreading. But this is saying that from the smallest number this way, how far does the graph go? Well, it goes to negative infinity, and it goes all the way to the biggest number to the right, which is positive infinity. Okay, then we're going to do the range now. Range, we're asking the smallest number first, meaning how far down does it go first? Well, it only goes down to this level. This is saying 0, so this is the lowest. Then we write how high does it go? Well, it goes as high as infinity. So we're going to write infinity here. Put y in the middle, and then less than or equal to signs. And that's your range, okay? That's for number 1, okay? So basically, this is the big part of it, is identifying the different parts of the graph. Okay, watch me do number 2. One more time, ready? Here we go. Number 2, you're going to do your vertex, which is -b over 2a, which is going to be -4 over 2 times -2, which is going to be -1. Okay, plug that back in. -1 squared is 1 times -2 is -2. Negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. So we got negative 2 plus 4 is 2. Minus 6 is negative 4. Right? Yep. Okay, so then we plot our vertex first, and then you're going to work this all out. So you're like, okay, it's going to go, should be a point here and here, and then 2 squared is 4 times 2 is 8, so there should be a point here and a point here, right? So you draw your graph. This is the first thing you're going to be doing in your homework, drawing the graph. Okay? Then you're going to start identifying things. The first thing you identify is the solutions. Okay? Looking up here, where does the graph touch the x-axis? Does this graph touch the x-axis? Yes or no? No, it doesn't. So it doesn't touch, so there are no solutions. So we would write no solutions. So instead of writing solutions, you just put a no in front of it. You just say no solutions. There aren't any solutions. Okay? Then we're going to ask ourselves, what's the axis of symmetry? Okay? So we start with x is equal to, always for axis of symmetry, go to the first number of the vertex, negative 1. Put that right here. Okay? Then we're going to do the minimum or maximum. We ask ourselves, how high up does this go? Well, it goes up to a certain point. There's a maximum point that it gets to. Okay? So this has a maximum. So since it has a maximum, we're going to write maximum. And we're going to say y gets to a certain point, but then it goes down. So it has to be less than or equal to, and then we take the y coordinate of the vertex, which is negative 4. Plug it in. Domain and range, remember. I'll move this to the side a little bit. Domain is the same always. The range isn't. So our domain is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. Put an x in the middle, less than or equal to signs in there. The range, we're asking for the small number first. What's the lowest this graph goes to? What's the lowest? Well, it goes on forever, so it's negative infinity. And how high does it go? Well, it goes all the way up to this point. Well, what is this number? It's at negative 4. Okay, so it goes up to negative 4. You put a y in the center and less than or equal to signs again. And that's it. So I've taught you how to graph, so this part's the easy part now. It should be easier. Today we're learning how to identify the parts, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so I want you to turn to your neighbor before you start writing. One person talk about how do we figure out the solutions, next person talk about how do we figure out the axis of symmetry, first person again talk about minimum or maximum, how do we figure that, and then second person again, how do you figure out domain or range. Ready, set, go. Okay, continuing, number three. I'm going to graph it for you, and then you're going to just watch right now. I'm going to do the graph really quickly. So you do your vertex. Your vertex. Shh, please end your conversations. So just watch right now. During your homework, you're going to put your vertex down first, which is negative b over 2a. So it's going to be negative 4 over 2a, which is just going to be 1. Plug 1 back in. 1 squared is 2 times 2 is 2. Minus 4 is going to be negative 2 plus minus 1 is negative 3. So your vertex is at negative 3. Shh. And you're going to plot your points from the shortcut I showed you. 4 times 2 is 8. Oh, that didn't look right. Oh, that's why. Again, these two are solutions. This one's a little bit smaller than 0. This one's a little bit bigger, so about a quarter smaller or bigger. You're going to write solutions on your paper or on your whiteboard. And then there's two of them, so you want to have two answers. X is equal to something and X is equal to something. Okay, I'll give you 15 seconds to write that down. One of the solutions is about here at 0. Okay, negative a quarter is fine too. The second one is right here at 2. So you could write your another solution like this. Okay, now axis of symmetry, everyone. You'd write AOS on your whiteboards, please. AOS, and then you write X is equal to. Remember your axis of symmetry. Look at your first number in your vertex. Okay, so I'll give you 10 seconds to write down the first number in your vertex. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2. So you're writing down X is equal to 1. Okay. So that's your axis of symmetry. Then we want to ask ourselves: is this a minimum or a maximum? The question you want to ask: is there a point that this graph ever stops going up? Does it ever stop going up? No, it doesn't. Does it stop going down? Yeah, it does. So raise your hand if you think it's a minimum, if this has a minimum. Raise your hand if you think this has a maximum. Okay, think about it carefully. Raise your hand if you think this has a minimum. Raise your hand if you think it has a maximum. Okay, good. So it has a minimum. So we would write down minimum. Okay, and you start with y is, since it's a minimum, it has to be greater than this minimum, or equal to. And we pick the second number here. What's the second number here? -3. Okay? Domain is always the same, so I'll help you out. For domain, you always write the same thing. You go -infinity all the way to +infinity. Put an x in the middle, and then less than or equal to signs there. Your range will be as follows. Okay, think about what's the smallest number first, the lowest. How low does it go? Negative what?
3.
-3. And then think about how high does it go? How high does it go? What? Infinity, right? So then you put infinity on the other end. Put y in the middle, and then less than or equal to signs in between those spaces. Okay? That's how you do it. That's all we're doing is identifying all these elements, okay? Make sense? So I hope you copied what I had. This is the copy one. Now let's see if we could do a one that's a little bit more by yourselves. Number 4, okay? I'll graph it for you. So number 4, if you were to graph it, you're doing it quickly. Oh, by the way, on number 4, does it open up or down? How do we know it opens down? -3, right? Okay, I just graphed it for you. First thing I want you to show me on your whiteboards is, are there any solutions? What are the solutions first? Solutions first. What are the solutions? Okay? Give you 10 seconds. So you're going to write down x is equal to, and then your answer. Are there any solutions? 5, 4, 3, 2 is equal to 0. Okay, next. What is the axis of symmetry? Okay, so we're starting the same way. X is equal to something. You have to figure out what's the vertex, right? What are the coordinates at the vertex, everyone? What? 0, 0, right? So you're going to put 0, 0 for your vertex and use that information to figure out what's your axis of symmetry, right? Okay? So the answers, so 0, x is equal to 0. Next, minimum or maximum? Turn to your neighbor and tell them, is it a minimum or a maximum? Okay, raise your hand. Tell me if it's a minimum. Is it a minimum? Raise your hand, minimum people. Okay, tell me if it's a maximum. Good, it is a maximum. It only goes so high, right? We're talking about, is it so low or so high? Minimum or maximum? Not sideways, but minimum or maximum. It goes to maximum height, you see? So, write down maximum, please. Shh. And you start with y is, and since it's a maximum, it has to be less than or equal to a certain number. What number do we put there? 0, good. Okay. Next is domain and range. So domain is always the same. So it's negative infinity all the way to positive infinity, x in the middle, less than or equal to. Your range is going to be from the lowest number. How far down does it go? How far down does it go? Negative infinity, right? It keeps going down forever. Not always. We have to look at what the graph says. This one only goes down to here, right? Okay, how high does it go now? Up to where? Up to 0. So then on here you put 0 as your big number. Put a y in the middle and then less than or equal to signs in the middle. And that's it. Okay? So, what we learned today is we're just how to identify all these parts of solutions, axis of symmetry, minimum or maximum, and then domain and range, okay?